love this podcast? Support us by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Hit the link in the episode description to support us now. Thanks for listening and enjoy.
Batter up, hear that call. The time has come for one and all to play ball. No, not gonna.
Yeah,
join in.
I don't. The song never. I have a confession to make after this cold open.
We'll get to that in just a second. Then put that on pause. I'm Nicole,
And I'm Rolando,
and this is Remakes, Reboots, and Revivals
an original podcast.
about unoriginality. So that was the opening of a song from the film A League of Their Own. And if you didn't know the song, then this episode isn't going to be for you. If you grew up in the 90s, or if you were just watching movies in the 90s, you didn't have to grow up. You most likely saw this movie, and I feel like a minority of people would have only seen this movie like once. I feel like this is a very rewatchable movie.
Oh.
And which is already, I know a confession Rolando's gonna say. But I just
Well, I don't think you know the exact confession.
okay. I am guessing you've never seen this movie before until
Not
recently.
in its entirety.
Okay,
Not
there you
that's the
go.
thing. So I've always seen bits and pieces of it because I used to run on cable all the time. And I kid you not, the color palette of this movie always bored me, and I would always look for a reason to change.
Is it too like pastelly?
It's too pastel-y, too kind of washed out.
Yeah, okay. Because
Right,
they're going for
and-
the old look.
Yes, and it just always that just drove me. It just bored me, which is probably why, like, when I was younger, I never got behind like black and white movies. You know,
Well, there's not really a palette to black and white movies other than black
it's
and white.
black and white, and that's like just
That's
boring.
That's not a palette per se, but I get what
But
you're saying.
Shades of gray is a palette, I would argue.
Okay, so then you would be in this minority where you didn't really watch it a lot growing up, even though you kind of did in your own way, like bits and pieces of it, or you were
I'd
familiar
seen bits.
enough
I
with
never
it.
saw like the full thing. And you know what the other thing is? It's just like it was a sports movie.
Yeah, baseball movies were the thing in the 90s. Every
God bless.
baseball movie I could think of came out in like the late 80s and 90s.
You know, you had Field of Dreams, Angels in the Outfield.
When did the
Eight
Natural
Men
come
Out.
Like,
The Natural was
80s.
late 80s. Yep.
Yeah.
Bull Durham. This movie.
Rookie of the Year.
Rookie of the Year. A lot of
Yeah.
them starring Kevin Costner, oddly enough.
Mm-hmm.
He really likes his baseball. Eddie, did you grow up watching this movie?
I've seen this movie. I love this movie. I've seen
Okay.
it a couple of times.
There we go. See?
It's Tom Hanks and Madonna. Come on.
And Rosie
It's a good
O'Donnell.
And Rosie
And
O'Donnell.
Gina Davis.
Oh,
the
of course,
star.
yeah, Gina
yes,
Davis.
yes.
This was like when Gina Davis was like a huge star, and like I think she's so gorgeous and just so like nobody looks like her, and she's tall and just beautiful. I love Gina Davis.
I actually do like Gina Davis with like the dark blonde hair.
No,
I'm
yeah,
so used
she
to
looks
seeing her in
good.
like I'm used to seeing her in like dark hair, you know, like brunette black.
Yeah,
That's a classic Gina Davis I know.
I actually think she is very era appropriate for the 40s. Like some of them don't really look era appropriate. Like
Yeah, yeah.
maybe Rosie doesn't, or Madonna's
don't
kind of a
know.
stretch, but like
Whoa,
Gina
whoa.
does.
You don't think there were hefty ladies back in the 40s?
I'm talking more about facial structure.
I don't. They don't
That look.
I don't
you
know.
that look.
like me. I don't know how much facial structure has changed in like 5 decades. You know.
Well, I guess I don't know. This is just like my own thing, but like when I saw The Great Gatsby, right? I was like, I don't know if I buy DiCaprio in the 40s. He doesn't look like someone from the 40s. Whereas Carey Mulligan, who played Daisy, I was like, I buy her in the 40s. You know what I
Oh.
mean? Like that
I don't
kind of
know.
like look.
Yeah. All right.
People
I didn't
back
buy
then
Carey
looked
Mulligan,
different.
but
Yeah, we talked about this in a past episode.
we
I
did. We
think.
did. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
But we're talking today about A League of Their Own.
Right. Now I have a question. Right. I'm just gonna get right into the topic here.
Yeah.
Is this movie just like a big film in like the lesbian community, or
would
do you think it's like a
assume
general
so.
pop culture thing?
So I think it's both. 30 years ago this year it came out. And exactly
30 years.
30
That's
years,
crazy.
yeah. And there's actually been like a lot of like 30th anniversary celebrations, like on podcasts I listen to, they've covered it. I've seen them on like news outlets like Gina Davis, like talking about the 30-year anniversary of it. So this is a pretty big pop culture movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess to commemorate it, Amazon Prime, you know, greenlit what do you think this qualifies as? A remake, a reboot?
It's like a soft remake.
Soft remake, yeah.
The reason I say
Reimagining.
Yeah, and I think the reason I call it that, yes, a reimagining, I think is fair because it's not a direct translation of the film, but they're taking elements of it and expanding upon it, right?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. I think that expanding upon it is key for sure. First, we'll talk about the original film, and then we'll talk about this new one. So 30 years ago, 1992, big movie year. I know Unforgiven came out and won Best Picture that year. Batman
What?
Returns came out. Yeah, that was the Best Picture winner, the Clint Eastwood Western, Unforgiven.
Oh, I've never heard of this movie.
Oh, really? Well, you don't
Yeah.
like Westerns, so
I
that
don't like
seems
Westerns, yeah.
appropriate, yeah. Batman Returns actually came out this year, and this was the movie that A League of Their Own opened that weekend with.
That sucks.
Yeah, right? Well, it opened it to be number 2, but it
Okay.
continued to be a successful, like, a commercial hit.
Yes. Is I think this is one of the director. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is her second film to cross that threshold of 100 million, and that was a big deal for a female director.
Yeah, well, I mean, you know, let's talk about Penny Marshall. I mean, Penny Marshall was a household name because of her role in Laverne and Shirley.
Yeah, she's the one that became a director, right?
Yeah, she's the one who directed this film. She directed
this one.
Big, and then right before this, she actually wanted to immediately make this movie, but she had to do like one for them and then one for her, kind of. So she did the movie Awakenings. So
That one sounds a little LGBTQ.
it is so
It's
nowhere
not.
near that.
The title's very
What,
misleading.
Awakenings?
Then
You haven't seen Awakenings?
I've never even heard of Awakening.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's nowhere near
Yeah.
LGBT.
Yeah.
She didn't make many more films after. I think Jumping Jack Flash was her first big. The one I just talked about, Awakenings, League of Their Own. I know she did Riding in Cars with Boys with Drew Barrymore. If you remember that movie, back
I do
in,
remember
like-
that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was her last film.
Oh.
So,
No, that's kind of a bummer.
but she's probably more well known to millennials, at least, as being in Hocus Pocus, where when the three witches go into the house of Satan, and like.
Mhm.
And she's the significant other of the guy who's dressed as Satan, which actually happens to be her brother, Gary Marshall.
That's creepy.
Who
oh,
is a
Gary
filmmaker.
Marshall.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
And he's directed Pretty
He's-
Woman and Runaway Bride and other movies. So
Wait, I thought he also did all those like Valentine's Day.
He
and
did,
New
yes.
Year's. Oh,
that is how
those-
he
those-
ended his career, with doing those kind of movies. The script was written by Lowell Gans and Babalu Mandel. Great names. Two men.
Yeah.
And they pretty much, you know, had found out about this All-American Girls Professional Baseball League that existed from about 1943 to 1952. And they were like,
Oh,
well,
there's
this would
like
make a
a-
great film.
This was a real thing.
Yeah, this was... Seriously?
I didn't know. Like,
Well-
I don't follow baseball. Period. Right. So like, I'm not like you're going to tell me that I need to. I don't even know men's baseball. You're expecting me to know about women's
but you
baseball.
know it exists, and you know, and the good thing about this movie is that we all kind of know that it existed. We might not know the details, but we know that women's baseball did exist because when the men went to war, Wrigley of Wrigley Gum decided, you know, let's make our women active and keep the game of baseball alive and blah blah blah. And actually, it
Wow,
ended
so
up
it
being
really-
a really good idea.
It was a candy maker, no less, just like in the movie.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so funny.
They couldn't get Wrigley for the movie, so they made it a Harvey bar. But yeah.
Yeah.
very
Big Gun
much
just wouldn't
based on
sign
it.
off.
Mm-hmm. So maybe that's why you were like, oh, you're surprised that it's real because like there's no such thing as a Harvey bar, but it was
No,
It was
I
a real
mean,
thing.
yeah, I mean, I guess I don't know. Like, they were so sexist back then. I just didn't expect them to let women play sports,
Yes, well that
Was
is
my
something that
assumption.
gets explored, but it's
as
interesting.
is explored in the movie.
I mean, look, 1943 to 1952, there were about 15 teams, and the movie really makes you feel like it was a national thing. This actually only was a very small part of the country that this existed within. That's why the teams are Rockford and Racine, because it only exists within the states of Illinois, Missouri, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and I think maybe Indiana, and that's it. So like Central America. I
Rust
mean,
Belt?
Middle America. I shouldn't say Central America.
Yeah, that's like, isn't that? That I'm pretty sure that's like the Rust Belt.
Okay. But yeah, so that was like pretty prominent actually, that after the men came back from war, this continued for a while until it kind of just fizzled out. And then everyone forgot it happened. And it really was like actually members of the league who really fought hard to like have their place in history earned. And then that's where they got the attention of these writers who then wrote the script, and then Penny Marshall made the film. And they consulted with a lot of people because this was, late 80s. So a lot of these women were still around and were still like willing to tell their stories. So a lot of the movie is actually based on real people, but then they just kind of like took a lot of liberties. Like there were two sisters who were in the sports. There was a girl who was like Marla was based on someone who was real, right? The whole story of like a girl who was trained to be a baseball player her whole life but didn't know how to be a woman or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
So they took all of that, and then they just had a lot of fun and came up with their own stories. And they took the story of the two sisters as the core of the story, with Dottie and Kit. And Dottie is played by Gina Davis, and Kit is played by Lori Petty, who, never really kicked off as a movie star. And what a shame, because I just love her. I mean, I don't love her character, but I love her as an actress.
Yeah, her character was kind of insufferable.
Oh, she was the worst. Kit is the worst.
I don't know. I would say she's the worst. I understand her frustrations here.
I think she sets herself up to be frustrated.
Whoa, hang on. If you were Gina Davis's sister, you just don't think that you'd just be constantly overlooked?
Yes, I would have a huge Napoleon complex or whatever it would be if my sister was Gina Davis. But at the same time, I wouldn't like go looking for excuses to make myself even more upset or even more insecure than I already am. Case in point, when the one guy came over and was like, "Oh, Daddy, we're doing this whole scoop on you in Life magazine," and then she interjects and goes, "Did you tell him anything about me?" It's like, what? Why would you do that? You're just like obviously gonna set yourself up to hear something you don't want to hear. And also, this is about your sister right now. Be happy for her. Why does it have to be about you? So, Kit is the worst.
I mean, yeah. Like I said, I think she's insufferable, but I empathize with her a little. I get it.
Oh,
I understand. Wow. Like I understand her character's frustrations.
Is this like your way of like feeling for Heidi?
Yeah, I guess that's my way of like empathizing with my sister right now. It's just like, Heidi, if you're listening to this, I am sorry that I have constantly stolen the sunshine out of the room.
Oh my gosh!
You were the black hole of the family, stealing all the lights.
Yeah, just
from everybody else.
I actually sympathize more with Kit. I feel like everyone loves my sister and like needs to come around and loving me. And even I'm like, Kit, you're the worst. So
okay.
All right. So anyway, that's like our main story is their relationship and the fact that Dottie is just a phenomenal catcher and a phenomenal ball player. She also forms a relationship with the alcoholic manager who does not want to be the manager of the Rockford Peaches, Jimmy Dugan, played by Tom Hanks, where he utters the iconic line, "There's no crying in baseball."
Yeah,
what do you think about
crying in baseball?
It's pretty good. It just sounds like Woody to me. I mean, what do you think about Tom
in
Hanks
that retrospect, it does sound like Woody.
Yeah, right? Like in 1982, it was probably like, oh, wow, Tom Hanks, he's great. He's funny. He could whatever. 30 years later, it's like, oh, it's kind of played out. I'm kind of over Tom Hanks.
Oh, you're going to get a lot of hate mail for that, I feel like.
I feel like Tom Hanks is like really killing his image with his choices. He's just making like too many movies that aren't doing anything for him, and he's just not doing that great in them either.
I don't think Tom Hanks needs to do anything anymore, to be quite honest. I think Tom Hanks is just fine.
It's America's beloved son.
If he wants to do like movies about robots in a post-apocalyptic world, that's Tom Hanks' prerogative.
So are you excited then for Pinocchio next week?
No, but I'm not. I'm also not mad at him for making his money, just being like, "Bye, I'll take this paycheck. I don't care." It's like Judi Dench is another one, right? Like I don't. Judi Dench doesn't have to prove anything to me anymore. You know what I mean?
Okay, so another person I can like maybe compare him to would be like Al Pacino or Robert De Niro, where it's like, oh yeah, you were once this great actor, and now you'll just kind of do anything.
No,
you'll become a caricature of yourself.
With Robert De Niro, he's still kind of trying to hold on to his glory days, though. There's a difference.
You think so?
Yeah, like come on, the Irishman, even trying to go as far as like trying to use CGI to make him look younger No, that's
That
like a
that
that's
wasn't
called-
his choice.
That's
that
a
was
cry for help.
Scorsese's.
He chose to act in it. He could have told Scorsese. It's just like Scorsese. Maybe cast someone younger who can move like a young person.
I think the real winner is Jack Nicholson, because when he realized he became a caricature of himself, he retired and he stopped making movies, which is, something that a lot of people should consider in their life is retirement. Anyway, I just am at this point where I'm over Tom Hanks personally. I know a lot of people love him, but I'm over
Maybe
it.
the world turned when he got COVID. Do you not remember this moment?
That's when we took it seriously.
That's when we took it seriously as like a nation. We kind of just like held our breath and were just like, oh no.
Yeah,
This
the
is-
only
this
reason
is
I was
real.
watching any of that was because I wanted to get some sort of glimpse of the Elvis movie. So it was.
Oh, that's right. I liked him in the Elvis movie. thought
I
he
know
was
you're
great.
like
Yeah.
the only ones who.
I thought he was great. I thoroughly enjoyed him in the Elvis film. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is great. This is like, I want to hear from the audience. Are you team
Yeah.
Tom Hanks or are you team Tom retire, please? Put it
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
bag.
yeah. I do want to hear from you guys because
Yeah, definitely. So let's move on. The thing about the Peaches too is that because this is a movie about a baseball team, is that even though the core story here is these two sisters, there's a lot of other players that we get to know and we kind of get to build relationships with. Madonna is in this movie, and this is kind of when Madonna was really intent on being like a serious movie star, I think. She had done
Really?
Dick Tracy in 1990. This is a
Uh-huh.
couple years away from Evita. Madonna doesn't make movies anymore. She kind of gave it up after, the flops of Swept Away and Next Best Thing and all those stuff. But like in the
they were-
90s,
They were problematic films.
yes.
Even back then, they were problematic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they weren't good for her. But she had just done Truth or Dare. She was in the Four Rooms film, the Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, Allison Anders, and I forgot the fourth filmmaker, collection of short films.
Mhm.
So yeah, she was like, and she Vogue, like all about like movie stars and stuff. She was really gung ho about being a movie star, and then that just kind of fizzled.
Yeah, she
So-
probably decided to just like,
Not
it's too
for
much
me.
work.
I also just think that this is probably one of her best roles, is because she just kind of gets to do the same thing over and over again, and
Yeah, and she's not the star. She's
not the star.
She
Yeah.
doesn't have to carry the film, right?
She also has a best friend with Doris Murphy, played by Rosie O'Donnell. Now, I think you and I have both read or maybe seen things of Rosie, and she's talked
Mhm.
about her role in this movie.
Yes.
Rosie O'Donnell is a member of the LGBT community, and I feel like even before she publicly came out, a lot of people kind of knew it, right? Like,
Yeah.
we knew without it being said. But according to Rosie O'Donnell, Penny Marshall was just not interested in telling an LGBTQ perspective
Uh-huh.
from this film, like at
Yeah.
all. She was like, whatever, just not my thing.
Right, yeah.
Uh,
So during the Rosie O'Donnell monologue where she's talking about her husband, where
Mhm.
it's kind of coded that she is lesbian and
Yes.
in this relationship for, kind of like what is it? To save face, like, like to
Yeah.
be presentable in public. Rosie was ready to play that as a coming out scene. And Penny Marshall kept telling her, she's on record to say this, and and Rosie said it, but Penny Marshall kept saying, it's just like, Rosie, that's not what this is about.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Like,
Despite the fact that
turn
Rosie
it
read
down.
it. It was, like Rosie, I think Rosie read that right. It's just like, yeah, this was a coming out scene without
Well,
having to be
Yeah.
a coming out scene.
She said that she played her character as if she was in love with All the Way May, who was
Mhm.
Madonna's character, and that she, was pretending to be straight, but she really was in love with her.
Mhm.
And I've read that as like the female relationships in so many movies. Like growing up, that it's just so nice to hear someone confirm that that's how they played it.
I mean,
Because in older movies, you had to read
Real-
into
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
and it makes sense though. Like, do you think Madonna was in on it? I think she kind of was. No.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, this is also the period of her life where she was like biffles with Sandra Bernhard,
Mhm.
who's a pretty well-known lesbian and I think was experimenting in her sexuality. I mean, Truth or Dare, hugely about that. So I think so.
Okay. Yeah, I was just asking just because I think they played their relationship as being, are they friends or are they maybe a little more?
Yeah, exactly. And
yeah.
I mean, to me, it works. It
Oh,
totally,
I
like-
would agree. It does work, yes.
Yeah, without them actually coming out and saying it, it's enough for me. So, We also
guys,
has
wait, real quick, and I know I just said that I had only seen bits and pieces of it. Obviously, I watched this film for the podcast in its entirety, so I just want to just clarify that in case everyone's wondering. It's like, how would he know? I watched the film.
he would know because he watched it.
As I usually do, in reverse order, right? Where I watched the series first and then went back.
Oh, wow. Okay, interesting perspective then. All right, so a couple of the characters that we got, Anne Ramsey as Helen Haley, who I think when they're doing like the montage, she's like serving the tea to everybody, and she's just like kind of like the chipper, really nice gal of the bunch.
No, I don't remember her.
Oh, well. We got Megan Cavanaugh as Marla Hooch. I'm sure you remember Marla.
I do remember. No, Marla, I think I'm so glad she got married and was like happy. They made it a point to like show her like being happy, because so much early in the film was her being like kind of miserable.
Yeah.
And I want to, and it's not even like, it's not even miserable about like playing the sports. I think it's just like, I think she realizes that like she's kind of like, society has deemed her the ugly one, and that's so fucked up.
It is so fucked up. Yeah, I mean, this is when it's so painfully like of a different era, and the era that's not even too long ago, because of how often they poke fun at the fact that she's quote unquote ugly, and this is just like something that they used to do to women all the time. When I was younger,
I would argue they still do.
They still do to an extent, but like it was running rampant back then. When I was younger, Marla was like my favorite character, and I actually was always really sad when she got married and left, because I loved her and I wanted her to stay. And I also didn't believe that character who loved baseball, who spent her whole life, would just give it up that easily.
Oh, hang on. So even rewatching this now, I don't think she necessarily loved baseball. As her father said, he's been pushing her to do this her whole life. Like,
yeah,
I think
I
think the first out she took it. That's why it made sense.
I guess we didn't have enough scenes with this character, though, to really know what was going on with her. She was just the butt of a joke. So I always read it as when I was younger, that I was like, well, she's just this really like sweet girl who I want to get to know more, and who actually is really good at baseball. And then she just leaves. Like I always wanted more of Marla. And that's always been a major gripe of mine, is the way that they treated her. Because she's not ugly, which is the craziest part. It's like, I get it by maybe the 1940s standard, because they also present the fact that like in the 40s, it was very important that, women came off as non-threatening and as women, ladies, who were well kept, and who, still crossed their legs and ate a certain way and spoke a certain way. Like this bizarre, at least by our standards in the 21st century, of what it is to be a woman.
Right.
So she very much was not fitting into that bracket, but like that's the only way in which Marla could be even labeled as a freak. And that's how everyone treated her, as a freak. And I just always felt so bad for her.
No, just the people. I don't think the players themselves never treated her like a freak, though.
Yeah. That's the nice thing about the movie, is that the players themselves were always like actually looked at each other as fellow human beings. Yeah.
It was like, I mean, if you think about it, the show will expand upon it more, but this is more or less a found family story.
It is, absolutely. A couple of characters we got. Tracy Reiner is Betty Spaghetti, and Betty Spaghetti has actually, to me, one of the most impactful scenes in the movie, where they're all in their locker room, and a note gets delivered from the war that one of their husbands died.
The fake out.
Yeah, and a very, I think, impactful scene, because like also it's like, oh right, a war's going on, and these are all women who have husbands. All of them have husbands for the most part. I mean, at least all the ones we get to meet, they're all straight and interested in men.
Well, the writers and director wanted us to they wanted to remind us, these are straight women.
These are straight heterosexual women playing baseball. Just
don't get any ideas.
And then we have Evelyn and her son, Stillwell Angel, I think.
I think that sounds right. He's important at the very, very end of the film, but not even important. But
yeah,
his name isn't important. He was just a kid who was just like, I'm gonna lose, whatever.
Yeah. Again, all these women, they become a found family. They really are appreciative and loving of each other, except for Kit towards her sister. They're not so nice to their guardian, another one who gets kind of treated, their chaperone, who gets treated really shittily. And like, also when he when Tom Hanks drunkenly kisses her and
Sexually
then
assaults
freaks
her?
out. Yeah, essentially, yeah. And then turns to her and says, "I loved you in The Wizard of Oz." Like, it's so fucked up. It's not even funny. It's like, why are you
I
treating
didn't
this
get
woman
that.
this way?
Why did he say that about the Wizard of Oz? Is he
Because she
calling-
looks like a witch. She looks like a wicked witch.
Oh, okay. Now I get it. I didn't get.
Yeah. Like, no, that's not Margaret Hamilton. He's just saying she looks like the Wicked Witch of the West.
I see. I mean, no one likes a chaperone, right? Like, I get it. Why we're picking on the poor lady.
I guess. I mean, she was a little uptight and stuff, but they punished. they poisoned her.
They
Fucking
did-
Jimmy
they did
Dugan
poison
sexually
her.
assaulted her, like insulted her to her face. This poor woman, just for doing her job.
That's the thing. Yeah, you're right. It is her job. Like, she was just following society's norms and stuff.
Yeah.
But she, as the enforcer, though, like, we're gonna take out our frustrations on society on her. So that makes sense.
But yeah, so a couple things that this movie doesn't tackle. Obviously, everyone's heterosexual, like we just said. So there's barely a hint of if you gotta read into Rosie O'Donnell being in love with All the Way May, and that's about it. And, you know, there's no diversity. There's one scene in the tryouts where they're all trying out and a ball goes all the way out to, you know, just all the way out in the field, whatever that's
Mhm.
called. Obviously, we don't
Home
know
run.
baseball. Yeah.
It's-
Sure.
it's-
Well, this is during the
Outfield.
tryouts. The outfield. Thank you. Thank you,
Outfield.
Eddie.
oh.
And there's a black woman on the side, and she picks up the ball and she throws it to them, and they're like, "Whoa, that was an incredible throw."
Right. Wait. Pause. Okay. So you remember how I said I saw this movie bits and pieces, and
Mhm.
when I was watching the show, one of the questions I asked, I asked Eddie, is just like, is this a brand new character? Because I don't remember there being any person of color in the original one. And
No.
then I see this scene, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. I guess this character existed in the movie all along. And I'm like, oh, wait, no, I guess not, because we don't see her.
Well, she existed, but then like this is the only sequence in which she exists, and then that's it. It's like this is them, you know, being socially conscious. I assume.
I
where-
don't. I don't know
literally in
that
90
scene-
standards.
Yeah, that scene's other than like just acknowledging the existence of black people in the
And that-
1940s.
Yeah, and like
'Cause
you can read into that, or maybe it's the new show that, you know, helped us read into that. But it's like, oh wow, this woman who is an amazing pitcher or amazing thrower, you know, doesn't even have the opportunity to play because it's whites only, right? It's the
Mhm.
40s. That was the reality of this country. You can read into that, but it's so quick, and it's just like such an interesting, you know, like thing too, because it's like, are they trying to make a statement with that? Like that scene is just so interesting, and they don't really expand upon it. But of course they expand upon it in the new show, and which we'll get to in a little bit. So overall, did you enjoy this movie?
Yeah, the movie's fine. It's a sports movie, and I'm not like a big sports movie lover. I think we talked about my disdain for sports movies when we covered The Mighty Ducks, right?
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
Disdain, such a strong
And maybe
word.
disdain is too strong. I just
Yeah.
don't. If a sports movie's gonna come up, I'm probably not going to watch it.
Yeah, I mean that's how I feel about football movies in particular, because I just don't get football. and
Oh,
it
except for
is
Remember the
not for me.
Titans.
Yeah, I think I saw that once, but you know, again,
Oh,
it really
seen-
wasn't for me.
So many times on Disney Channel. I love that movie.
Now, I've read or I heard in an interview that Penny Marshall said that the Hollywood executives didn't actually want them to end it the way that they did, which is showing all of the women now and them, you know, getting together and celebrating.
Mm-hmm.
And she had to really kind of fight for that, which I think was actually really great and made it more emotional. I mean, I'm more emotional. I think I'm a more sentimental type of person, and I can be easily susceptible to cry and whatnot. So I always get emotional when watching it. But did you think it was sweet? Did you think it worked? Like seeing all the real women?
It was a little saccharine, in my opinion.
Very saccharine, yes.
I don't. I don't like movies where the framing device is like a memory, right? Because we start off with like Gina Davis, all grown up now, right? I forgot her. Dottie,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
You know that's not Gina Davis, right?
I know.
But
I'm aware.
Gina Davis dubs her voice, which is very interesting. You know, it's like a weird like.
Oh,
it's-
did she? I didn't
Yeah,
even
she
notice
dubbed
that.
the
That's-
voice.
That's
Yeah.
so funny. So yeah, we start off in the present. She's going to go to like a ceremony that's going to honor these women in baseball. right? I think they were going to get inducted to the Baseball Hall of Fame, and then the rest of the movie is basically just a long flashback, and then we're back to the ceremony, and all the women get together, and they're like, oh my God, hi, blah, 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 and then it's just
and then Kit and Dottie look at each other like they haven't seen each other in years. It's very interesting. Like, I wonder what became of their relationship. Like, did they stop talking or something? Were they estranged? So many questions.
There were a lot of questions there. And when you were talking about the ending, I thought you meant the ending of making the Peaches lose.
Oh, no. Well, so apparently it's a thing that people are like, did she purposely drop the ball or did she not drop the ball when, Kit came to the base? Because Dottie's such a good catcher. We've seen, her exercise her body in ways just to catch the damn ball. So a lot of people don't believe that she would drop it.
She apparently let her sister win?
People think she let her sister win. Apparently, Gina Davis knows the answer to this and doesn't want to tell us for some reason, which is so stupid. Like, it doesn't have to be this giant secret, Gina Davis. Just fucking tell us.
No, sometimes mystery. Sometimes it's fun to have a little bit of mystery.
I guess so. Do you think she dropped the ball on purpose?
I thought she did.
I think she did too, because she loved Kit.
I thought she did.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that at that point Kit was kind of just raging.
So terrible, being the worst. And then it's like she pretty much gives up baseball for you and her husband and stuff. She never really cared about it. But so she gives up baseball for you, drops the ball for your team to win, and you don't talk to her for like 40 years. What is your problem?
Yeah, now in retrospect, I think you're right. Like she's pretty terrible.
Yeah, not a good character. But those older actresses really do. Like, only Kit and Dottie look like the actresses. Everybody else, I'm like, there's no way that's Madonna. There's no way that's Rosie O'Donnell.
Oh, I don't know. I saw May.
I guess, okay.
I didn't see Rosie O'Donnell.
Yeah, the Rosie O'Donnell was not.
The Rosie O'Donnell was a stretch, but May I saw.
Yeah, because older Rosie O'Donnell looked straight. But the ending I'm talking about is actually like, talking, letting people know that this was a real thing. It like legitimizes it, and it lets people know like, hey, which is why I'm so intrigued that you didn't know that this was a real thing, because of the way the movie ends, where it's like, no, this was real. Look at all these women getting together and seeing that this part of history was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame. It validates its place in history almost,
right?
And it sucks that we have to do that through movies, but we do, and that's why movies are so powerful.
Did they get into the Baseball Hall of Fame?
I think they have like a little section, but there are fights actually for them to get their own museum.
Oh, I mean, it was only like 9 years that they
12
played.
Years.
12 years.
I would visit that museum.
Would you?
I would. There are other women in baseball that I want to be more educated on.
I don't know.
Doing the research.
I don't think we see myself going to like the actual Baseball Hall of Fame. So
well, yeah, but you don't like sports, so that's.
I also
why.
barely like history, to be quite honest. So
really.
Like, I talked about the 80s, like they're the barbaric times.
This is true. I have to pull an arm and a leg with you to get you to watch a black and white movie from the 60s. So
yeah, see.
All right, well, so it was all right. It was good. I'm glad you finally watched it, but you watched it after you watched the new A League of Their Own, which I'm really fascinated to know how that worked for you, because I can't, fathom that.
So, are you aware of Clark's theory of stages of minorities in mass media?
No, tell me.
It's a what's his name? Cedric C. Clark. He wrote an essay, and he kind of broke down the 4 stages of representation in media for minorities, right? The 4 stages are non-recognition as stage 1, right, where we don't acknowledge the existence of characters. I would argue for A League of Their Own from 1992, lesbians just do not exist in the world of this film. All right. Then there is stage number 2, ridicule, right, where they are the butt of the jokes. Stage 3 is regulation, where I would argue the black character that we see in A League of Their Own is that, right, in which regulation means like they are shown in the most only acceptable manner, which is just like seen, not heard. Look, she could throw a cool fastball, but that's it. We don't need to touch that anymore. And then the final stage is respect. And I think 30 years later, right? 30 years later, here we are, where I think we finally hit that threshold for this franchise where we hit respect for minorities here, and the minorities being Black and
Queer.
LGBTQ. Yeah, queer. Thank you. Now, before actually we go to
Latinos.
And Latinos, yeah. Oh, yeah. It wasn't just like Black. It was like, yeah. But what's it called? But we do have important African American representation here in this show for sure.
Yeah.
There was a spinoff though of the film that aired for like 5 episodes, right?
Yeah, the 1993 sitcom, which a couple of the characters repeat. I think Betty Spaghetti, Marla's in it.
Mm-hmm.
Gary Marshall returns as the Harvey Bar guy. And John Lovitz, who was a scout in the first one, is also in this new one. So
Who was kind of my least favorite character to me.
I know. It's like, why did he get such a high billing when he's like in 10 minutes of the movie? But John Lovitz was big back then. You can watch these episodes on YouTube, by the way. It's actually really interesting. Yeah. Because seeing these women who, did these roles and then seeing them like minimize them for sitcom like gags, like Marla's going like half the time, I made a facial expression. It's just not good. And funny enough, Tom Hanks directed one of the episodes.
Did he really?
He
Wow.
did. Penny Marshall directed the first. Tom Hanks directed, I think, the third. And the screenwriters wrote the first 2 episodes, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Look at that. All right. Well,
Everybody was
let's
on board
add
for
we'll add a link to the episodes for sure.
Yeah.
If they're on YouTube, why not?
Yeah,
Check them out, guys.
But yeah, so 30 years later, Amazon Prime has greenlit a new reboot, reimagining, remake sort of thing of A League of Their Own.
Mm-hmm.
It is created by Will Graham and Abby Jacobson from Broad City fame,
Who is also starring in the show.
who is also starring in the show as Carson Shaw. Now, this is not like the next generation of Peaches. This pretty much is just like taking
The plot.
It's pretty much the original League of Their Own, how it's like these are the women that were recruited to play and this is the life that they had. It's the same exact thing for this new show, but it's a bunch of new girls for the Rockford Peaches, which is interesting because I'm like, they didn't even go with a different team. Maybe Dottie and Kit could have been on another team and they could have been the Racine Bells. No, this is the new Rockford Peaches.
There's just a brand new team. We do have our crotchety former baseball player played by Nick Offerman from Parks and Rec, who, what a joy when I saw, I didn't know he was in the show. I was like, oh my God, he's in it. Oh, This is the role he's playing. I was a little, because I'm so used to seeing him, well, we'll talk about that because I'm not complaining about his acting or the role. It's just not the character that I'm used to seeing.
Okay.
On him.
Well, he doesn't stick around for that long, so it's about the formation of the Rockford Peaches in the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, and the main character is Carson Shaw, who is played by Abby Jacobson, and everyone thinks she's a farmer. I even was about to say she's a farmer, but she's not. She's just a girl who came from a really small town who decided who was not going to do it, and at the last minute realized that she had to do it and leave behind the life that she wasn't that happy with.
And leave behind, like, this wasn't like a whitewashing type of thing. Like, it's just like in the original film, the woman who's leaving the life behind, she's not leaving it behind. She's putting it on pause until her husband returns. This one, Carson Shaw, is very much making a decision. I am leaving my husband.
Literally on the way to her hotel, she meets 2 other women. She meets the Darcy Carden character, Greta, a very glamorous woman, and her friend Joe, I think. Joe DeLuca, her best friend, played by Melanie Field, who actually was in the MTV version of Heathers. Well, so she's, I think she's around my age. She's a very young actress, and she gets to play Joe, best friend of Greta. Darcy Carden, who we know from being Janet in The Good Place, if you've ever watched that show. And then when they get there, they meet a whole new group of girls. And all of these girls are more diverse in a lot of ways than the ones that we met in the original film. Like, Rolando can't remember half of them because they all kind of looked alike. They're all just a bunch of skinny, white women.
Oh, well, they're not white. There's some Latinas.
I'm talking about the film.
Oh, you're talking about the film. Okay, about the
yeah. But I feel like it's easier to, decipher who's who in the show because they're more diverse. So we have
Lupe,
the pitcher.
the pitcher. She's not Spanish though. She's
she's a Mexican.
from Mexico.
Played by Roberta Colindrez. We also have Jess, who's Canadian. She only likes to wear pants.
Right.
Yes. Which, by the way, Katharine Hepburn at this time had been radicalized for wearing pants. But was making it more of like a statement that women could wear pants. So it was still really new for women in this time period. So and these two women are also clearly members of the LGBTQ community.
These two,
Lupe and Jess. I'm just saying these two are clearly.
a
couple of other ones might not be so clear. Maybe Joe too.
Joe, they weren't even subtle with it when she's talking to the blonde girl, and she's like, what are you into? She's like, blondes.
Yeah.
And she's looking at her. It's like, okay.
Yeah, seriously. We have Shirley, who is Carson Shaw's roommate, and a very anxious, nervous. What else could we say about Shirley? Sheltered, neurotic,
yeah. I thought funny, like what to be the butt of the joke. Now, is that borderline racist? If like the joke there is that she's Jewish, right? Are we making fun of her for being Jewish though, or are we just making fun of the character?
I think so. I'm going to use the word again, sheltered, because I do think that like the comedy was the fact that she like was a very sheltered, girl. And I think that maybe, I don't know, they're trying to like come from like, oh, look at this sheltered Jewish girl kind of a comedy.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, oh, look at how Jewish she is. It's like, no,
That's
look
true.
at how sheltered she is.
They're not playing off the fact that she is Jewish. They're playing off the fact that, okay, you're right. One of my favorite scenes though is when she was supposed to be the chaperone and she was complaining about being left alone with the guy for like 11 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
This actress, I know her from very small roles where she drops the F word. She plays like a high level like attorney on the other two. And she, I think she's like a PR agent, right? And she just drops the F word with such conviction. But like, I give her the pass because her character is so entertaining in those few scenes she's in. That's the only thing I know her from. The other two, but I dug this character.
She was funny. Yeah.
Yeah. She was great comic relief.
She was.
For being the straight woman, she was excellent comic relief.
And it was also like, okay, yeah. When you say the straight woman, one of the only straight people, yeah. But also like, I'm surprised she even has a sexual orientation because she's just so young and so sheltered and just does not know anything about that type of life. We also have Maybelle, who I think is the blonde.
Yeah, that sounds like a blonde name.
Yeah, it does sound like a blonde name, yeah. And then we have Esty, who is a Cuban player who speaks practically no English and but is also allowed to be on the team. Now, the first episode is them all meeting and trying out on the big field, just like in the beginning of League of Their Own. It's all the beats are pretty much the same as the movie, but they expand upon things more. We see that moment that happened in the original film where, there's a black person who's on the field and who takes the ball and throws it to him, and they're like, wow, what a great arm. And they take that character, essentially, or the idea for that character, and they expand upon it. And they came up with a character named Maxine, but she goes by Max, and she's incredibly passionate about baseball, and she just wants to be given a shot, and they won't even like humor her for being on the field because of the color of her skin. Yeah, and she has and she's played by Shantae Adams, who I've never seen before, but does a great job.
Oh yeah, no, she's so captivating on screen. I think she gave such a very, very heartfelt performance. Her and her best friend, I think, were.
Her best friend is my favorite character.
They were easily their scenes together. Actually, literally, anytime we were in their storyline, I was just enthralled by their storylines. You know what I mean?
Yeah, her best friend is Clance, who is played by Bemisola Ukumelo, and she's a huge British comedian. So this is her kind of like, being introduced to, I think, American audiences, which is also amazing. Like, you're like, wow, how do British people do American accents so well, except for Harry Styles?
And she had to do like a Southern accent. A Southern period accent, no less.
Yeah, I know, like incredibly well done. And just such wonderful vibes radiating off of her and that character, and
Oh,
just
yeah,
so
no.
sweet. I mean,
I
definitely
would-
my favorite.
Jenny, there were times while watching the show where I was just like, I kind of just wish the show was about them, to be quite
Yeah,
So, like, you know-
more so Clance, because there were times where Max kind of got on my nerves because she was being a bit extra.
Well,
and
you know.
if you can't tell, I don't like it when characters are being a little extra.
Well, but the thing with Max though is, so Max is not only a woman, she's a black woman in the 1940s, which is, geez, like, talk about a reminder. Yeah, because the show just does. The show actually did a pretty good job of reminding me of just like how shitty the times were, as opposed to the film, where the film is kind of just like all, I don't know, happy scenes, and like you forget. The film makes you forget that racism was a thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
And
Except
this-
for that one scene with the woman throwing the pitch. That's it.
Right. But even then, like, there were no signs of the racism and the hostility that
Nope.
minorities felt back then. You know, this show puts it front and center, and I thought kind of smart.
Yeah, well, it's really checking the privilege of the people who got to
Mhm.
play, you know? Like, hey, there were all these women who got to play, and that was groundbreaking, but they also completely neglected to let in all these other women. And those stories need to be told. You know, what about, like, someone who desperately wanted to be seen and to be given a chance and who just was denied simply based on the color of their skin, right? That is
Right.
a story worth exploring. And I'm really, really happy that they did that. Now, of course, sometimes it became too fantasy for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's
But it's a
you
TV
know.
show and whatever. But like, because they
is
did a
fiction.
really good job of, I think, actually portraying things through an accurate historical lens. They consulted with a lot of women. Actually, when they were promoting this, they had a woman named Maybelle Blair, who is 95 years old, promoting with them. And because they went and they actually talked to her. Maybelle Blair was a player in the All-American Girls Baseball League. And they consulted with her. And at 95 years old, while talking with these people and doing promotions for this film, she came out officially as a lesbian.
wow. Aw, that's
Isn't that
sweet.
great? Yeah. And I think she even did it like during one of the interviews, like public interviews for this, right?
Uh-huh.
So now she privately, when, you know, Abby Jacobson and the team went and spoke with her and asked, you know, like, tell us some stories and stuff, she did privately tell them, you know, and has the courage now in our political and cultural landscape to actually publicly say who she really is.
Right.
And it's because of talking to people like this that we got to see what life was like. So like things that happen in the show were like secondhand stories told from Maybelle. Like they go to a gay bar, and she told them what it was like to go to a gay bar in the 40s, you know, and that's where Rosie O'Donnell comes in.
Yeah. So, which is funny. So I'm glad that they actually had someone from the time to like talk to them about this, because I was going to say, it's just like, I don't know how these ladies would feel if the show is just painting them all just lesbians. You know what I mean? Because like this show would have you believe that like 95% of them were.
I know, right?
lesbians.
The almost like the stereotype of like women who play sports, they're all gay.
Right. Exactly. But
There
if
are
they
straight
had-
women. We don't spend
Right.
time with them on the show.
Right.
Even though, do we think Esty is gay or is Esty straight?
SD. She might be straight. Technically, I would argue that, I don't know. Do you think Greta? Do you think Greta is a lesbian, or I thought she was bi?
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if she was bisexual. I mean, she certainly doesn't seem to mind being with men.
Because Eddie and I had a disagreement on this.
Okay, what was the disagreement?
Well, Eddie thinks she's hiding her lesbianism with the facade of being with men. Eddie.
So I get like in passing she mentions little things about like her mom and like so I get that this is a person who knew very early on in her life that she had to survive. She had to be an adult very early, and she had to use what she needed to use to navigate a man's world, which is her looks, her charm, her ability to smile at a difficult situation and to brush things off. So I think one of those things too is like also like if she, I feel like she's a lesbian, bisexual. I mean, but has learned to navigate like, okay, I can charm men, but I can also be this too.
Yeah.
I think she has learned that she can decide I could be anything I want, but I also know I need to work within the parameters of this society
Absolutely.
that may be hurtful that I experienced. She looks like she's a person that has experienced hurt, but
Yeah.
has like made herself.
Yeah, in one episode, she says a line, something along the lines where it's like, when I go out, I always make sure that I'm being seen on a man's arm or something. Like, she knows that she has to keep up appearances. Which I think Carson even asked her, like, that night you kissed me and you went off with that guy. She's like, yeah, I have to, like, make sure people see me do that, you know?
Right.
Like, and she's definitely, I would agree with Eddie, too. Out of everyone, she also seems the most afraid of who she is, or at least afraid of what society will do to her if she's exposed for who she is.
Interesting.
Um,
Yes, I would agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like she puts on like this tough persona, but yeah, it's just that it's like a facade.
But I think she's tough also.
No,
'Cause
yeah,
I think given the opportunity and not having to worry about being kicked off the team, she would have gone up to that guy and punched him in the face.
Yeah.
The guy that was mocking her, you know, like,
Oh, yeah,
and then mocking
yeah.
her friend Joe, which even made her even more infuriating.
Yeah. I mean, what did you think about Carson and Greta's relationship?
I mean, I saw it coming down a mile away. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it wasn't. You know, they jumped right into it. I think first episode we have them kind of hooking up, and
Yeah.
I realized it's just like, oh, they're not sugarcoating this. This is going to be a very lesbian show. Like they're not. This is
Yes,
not
it's
going
very
to like.
lesbian.
Yeah, like which good. Like you know what I mean? Like
Yeah, no,
like-
for sure.
because like. Prior to this, the last thing I had heard was that interview with Rosie where they were telling her, it's just like, this isn't a lesbian coming out scene. It's just like, this show is quite the opposite. This show is like, yes, it is.
Yeah, we're gay. Yeah.
Like, deal with it. And I appreciate it. And yeah.
I wished I thought they had more chemistry. I don't know. I think they're friends in real life or something. So there's like somewhat of an awkwardness to it.
Maybe.
But I didn't completely buy it. But I mean, again, I'm just here for the fact that this show has multiple lesbians and there's not a lot of tragedies going on. There are some tragedies, but
Yeah. But you wouldn't make out with Greta, Darcy? I mean, Darcy was just so
maybe.
smoldering, I feel like.
maybe.
Yeah. I actually enjoyed Abby's performance as
Yeah, no, I think she did good as Carson.
yeah,
I mean, I have some critiques of this show, but I'll get into that in a little bit. Because I want to talk about some things that I don't think you guys know happened in the show.
no. So like Eddie and I only got to watch like half the series, so by all means spoil away.
Yeah, so one, Rosie O'Donnell does make an appearance, I think around episode 5 or 6, and she's the owner of a gay bar.
Which we missed. I
You
can't
missed,
believe.
yeah.
Like,
Where like, because Abby becomes like the coach after the Nick Offerman character pretty much abandons the team.
so he
like,
abandons the team for the series.
Yeah,
He's only
he
in it for,
doesn't
like-
come back. Yep, he's only in
Wow.
like 2 or 3 episodes.
Okay.
She takes over as the coach, and then there's definitely like this rivalry between her and Lupe, who's like threatened by her and loves, you know, the coach, the
Yeah.
old coach.
Right.
So one day she like follows her because she's giving away her information and she's like betraying the team, and she follows her to a gay bar. And it's
Oh.
like secret, you know, like you have to say things or you know need to know the password, and it's in through a door and all this stuff. And Rosie's there, and Rosie actually plays a trans man in it.
Oh really?
yeah.
Wow.
And you know, and so like all of these people, and you see all like soldiers together, and you see, you know, women and trans people, you know, and like how people actually existed in that day. But then of course it gets rated at the end of the episode, and
course,
Joe
I'm
gets
sure.
actually detained by the police and injured by the police, and in order for them to avoid a scandal, they have to trade her. And by the trading her to the Racing Bells, or I forget which, I think like Portland or some team, Greta freaks the fuck out and wants to abandon the team, you know,
Okay.
because that's what Greta does, is when things get hard, they run, right? So that's a big story there that happens.
Yes.
But in Maxine's case, another big story happens where, you know, we find out that Maxine is secretly gay, and she doesn't even, like, Clance doesn't even know this, right? It's like very much a secret from her family and from everyone. Like, she's also trying to like make a relationship with this guy happen, but she's
And
like
she's
in a
also-
competition with him because he's on the
Oh.
baseball team in the Negro League.
And she's dating, or she was, the deacon's wife.
Yeah, she's fooling around with the minister's wife or deacon's wife.
And I was just like, scandal. That's, again, this
And
is
she's
the
just-
show I
she's-
would watch.
Yeah, right. And having so much conflict with everyone in her life, especially her mother, who she feels like just doesn't understand her and her passion for baseball. And there's a character that's mentioned called Birdie, which actually was her aunt. And she's like, Birdie, Birdie left this house because of you, and you didn't understand Birdie. So Max, in search of like someone that she can relate to, goes in search of Birdie. And when she finds Birdie, she sees that Birdie is actually living life as man now, and Birdie is a trans man. And Birdie has a lover that he lives with, and he lives a very happy life in this new identity, but being perfectly okay with who he is as a trans man. So a couple of things that I have read in the reviews of this show is that they're like, oh, they're just throwing the trans agenda in there, or like, oh, trans people didn't exist or whatever. Like, this is unrealistic.
I'm sure they existed back then. How
They-
much we know about them is a different story.
They 100% existed. And I actually will tell you a story about someone who lived in this era who was a trans man. There was a jazz musician who fronted the Billy Tipton Trio. And Billy Tipton lived his entire life with his many wives, even though he was never legally married, and children. And it wasn't until he died that their family found out that their father was indeed anatomically a woman.
Wow.
And there's actually a documentary, I think, called No Ordinary Man. You could look this person up, Billy Tipton. And we don't know whether or not Billy Tipton, obviously, the terminology wasn't there, right? Did this
Right.
person hide because they knew that the opportunities that were awarded to jazz musicians would only be awarded to men? So did they live this life doing this, or did they identify this way, right? But there are many people. This is just one example that we're finding out that people like this did exist, and Christine Jurgensen from the 50s, the first ever person who had a sex change, right? These people did exist. So the fact that the show is actually showing this is not that far off from the truth, and it's actually pretty great. Now, the one thing that I question is whether or not Bert would have a lover who accepted them for who they were.
I mean, it probably would have been hard to find, but
it would have been really hard to find, because the thing about Billy Tipton, at least just the one example I can draw a comparison to, is that nobody knew the truth. Like, people had kind of things, but nobody said anything. Like, it was very all left unsaid. So I'm just like, wow, what an open-minded person in the 1940s. But hey, I'm sure some of them existed.
I'm sure, and I think that's also where fiction comes in, and it's okay, to paint these fictional stories, because at the same time, I think us specifically, and I mean us as like the queer community, we need to sometimes hope. It's just like, oh man, even back then, see, there's hope still for us.
No, for sure. And like, just seeing, like, giving, the platform or the place that these people did exist, like, and also like giving them good lives. And
right.
The fact that they were happy and were content and were able to live with us, and like, it was fine, like, people who are afraid of trans people too, like, there's no reason for it, truly. There really is none, so.
For sure. I can't believe, so once again, like, people all offended because we have some trans representation.
I think a lot of people looked at this and was like, man, this really has a gay, or a queer agenda. And
The first episode said so, and that's okay. If this isn't your show, stop complaining about it, though. Like,
but it's also like, okay, hey, some people are gay. There are trans people in the world. Like, we can't ignore it. It's not going to go away. Like, shut the fuck up. Now,
you're watching a show about women playing sports. You don't think you're going to see lesbians?
But I do have a gripe with this show, and it's none of that shit. I mean, these are the things I liked about the show. I didn't like the way that the show was written in terms of its dialogue, because I think that they did no research as to how people actually spoke in the 40s, and that they sounded way too much like they came from the 21st century. I actually wrote, like, when I watched the show, I wrote down things that they said. I was like, there's no way that people said this in the 40s. And that is my major gripe. I watch a lot of old movies.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of black and white movies. But I also know that other people watch these movies too, and other people have somewhat of a knowledge of how people spoke back then. It is not hard to remove vernacular from, a today time, like just remove things that people say today and maybe just watch a movie and pick up some of the words that they used back then to make it more authentic, because it takes me out of the story every time they say it. Now, here are some things that I wrote down.
Yeah, I want to hear.
One, who does that? People did not say that back then. That is very now. Like, who does that in that way too?
What
right?
would they say back then?
Oh, like, what would be a similarity?
Yeah, I mean, maybe you don't know. I'm like,
there might not even be like a similarity. They just might say like, I can't believe they did that, instead of just who does that.
Sure.
Somebody said that would be so gravy. They did not say that in the 40s. Saying that would be wonderful. They would not say gravy in the 40s.
I don't think they say that nowadays. So.
I know gravy is not even something. How in the hell? How in the hell did that happen? People did not say that back then. I mean, maybe they did, but at least they weren't allowed to say it in a polite society. If we're gonna win this game, let it be fucking epic. People did not use epic in that way back then.
I thought you were gonna call out the fucking.
The fucking. I mean, people curse, but they probably it's more so the epic part. You got this. You got this. They did not. That's a very new kind of slang word. And then I put anything Abby Jacobson says, because she's just not believable as somebody from the 40s.
No, yeah, that I would agree with you on that for sure. I thought she was fine in the role, but like it didn't feel very period. So this does not feel like. Well, hang on. Well, how do you feel about Incredible Mrs. Maisel?
The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel?
Tomato.
I never watched that and was like, wow, this dialogue is so unbelievable.
Because a lot of dialogue is kind of unbelievable on that show. Not necessarily for the period, but like I think the way they speak is not how they would have been speaking in the 1950s. The speech patterns.
Interesting.
It sounds. You're literally listening to the Gilmore Girls talking in the 1950s on that show.
Yeah. I haven't watched The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel in a while, so I should get back to that. And I will get back to you on that as well.
Okay. I was just asking just because it's an Amazon show, so maybe this is like their thing.
Well, I'll say this. When the scenes were with Max and Clance, I didn't have the issue. It was really when it was Carson and some of the other white girls that it became the issue. Especially like Greta and Joe. Like those three were just like using terminologies and words that were just not believable. I was like, stop it. Stop trying to be like, I don't know, were they trying to relate so much to people nowadays and make like the 40s more accessible or something? Or they just didn't fucking care? And it just sucks.
Maybe. I mean, the 40s are like, if you think about it, the 40s are like almost 100 years ago. Right?
Yeah.
So like,
but you know,
I don't know. Like, do they speak like that in Bridgerton? No, I don't think so. I don't know.
If you're just gonna put all, like, you know, soundtrack is one thing. You can play whatever the fuck you want. It's fine. It's just music. It's a film. But if you're gonna, I think language is as important as costumes, right? If you're gonna make a period piece and maybe the music or whatever, like the things that should be the same are maybe the costumes and maybe the language, because that's what makes me really feel immersed in that time period, right? Like Romeo and Juliet sacrificed the costumes for the language. They kept the language, but they made everything more up to date, right? They kind of like, that's why it was so like radical or whatever. The Baz Luhrmann one.
Yeah.
So
but
those are
isn't that the fun of media? Like we can do whatever we want.
Yeah, and like Marie Antoinette is kind of like that, but
that's
like,
what I was gonna say. Yeah, isn't like one of your favorite movies Marie Antoinette like that?
I do really like Marie Antoinette, but again, her language was the only thing she really changed was the music. I mean, the language wasn't that different other than the fact that they spoke English. But they weren't like crazy speaking like 20th century or whatever. And the costumes they shot at Versailles, you know, like
I'm like tempted to make a movie that takes place in the
like the 1890s and they just say like, oh my God, the whole time.
Yeah. Actually, I feel like the show, Another Period, is similar in that vein, right? Where it's a comedy. It's a comedy. Okay, so it's a sitcom from Comedy Central where it takes place in, I want to say, I don't know, it's in the past, right? When they're still wearing those big frolicky dresses and stuff, right? But they're still speaking very contemporary because it's supposed to be like our version of Socialites.
Okay.
Right? And that's like kind of the gimmick for this show. Another period.
Yeah. I think there was like a Josh Whedon film version of Much Ado About Nothing that came out within like the past 10 years. And the thing that they did was that they kept the Shakespeare dialogue, but they said it in like with vocal flair and stuff like that. So it's like,
oh,
me
interesting.
doth think the lady protests too much. Like they changed it like
the
that.
vocal fry. I like that. I
Which
actually
is
like the-
really
yeah.
interesting, yeah. But I don't think that's what they're going for here. I don't know. I feel like they just kind of I don't feel like there's an artistic decision that they're going to be like, we're going to make everything really contemporary, and even though it's set in the 40s. I don't think that's what's going on. I think everyone else is believable, but a couple of characters aren't, and they need to improve on that. And I don't know why they didn't, pay more attention to it.
Yeah. Well, Abby Jacobson did create the show, and she is the lead actress, and I'm sure she was just like, well, I'm doing whatever I want to do.
Yeah, I guess she.
No
just
shade.
didn't
No
wanna do
shade,
her Catherine
Abby.
Hepburn.
If I were given my own show, I would be doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a critique. It's just an observation. I just want to point that out.
I also think maybe I'm not the best audience since I have seen many films from this time period that, I'm going to be more critical. So,
Right. All right.
but
I mean, it
I guess-
didn't bother me, but I also, at the same time, though, I was more enthralled by Maxine's storyline, to be quite honest, though.
yeah.
Like,
Clans. I love Clans so much.
she's so good. And just, how does her storyline cross over with, like, the main storyline, though?
Not yet. So what happens is that it might
that
be in
was my
season
one-
2.
That was my big complaint about the season, because, like, her storyline felt so removed from the rest of the series.
Yeah.
Where I was just like, if I had to pick which series I would rather watch, it might have been Maxine's story, right?
Yeah. So the crossover would be that Max and Carson actually form a friendship, and they
Right.
and they like meet up nightly, and they throw pitches and they chat and stuff. And Max
okay.
gets
All right, fine.
pissed off at Carson because of her privilege and whatnot. But like
Rightfully
that's
so.
about it. Rightfully so. Now that was another thing where I was like, none of these girls have any flaws. Like not one of them is racist. One of them would have been racist.
Sure.
Like-
No, you're right. I think definitely the Hispanics would have definitely been racist.
Yeah, or people would have been racist to them too. It's like,
And
why
that's also
is
true, yeah.
racism between these women? Like, why are these women all so progressive? I just
White
like
passing.
the only one who isn't is Shirley, but it's only played to comedic, like effect, right? And at one point, like when she finds out that people are gay, she's like, "Oh my god, it's contagious," and she like kisses one of them, and she freaks out about it.
Shirley would have definitely been racist. And
Yeah, but like again, only played to comedic effect. Like that actually statistically speaking, in the 1940s, probably one or more of them would have been
Way
highly
more.
racist.
way more.
Way more. So it's like I don't buy that. Not only is Carson like the coach and like secretly accepting of her lesbianism and pushing everyone to the gay bar to like open up their boundaries, but she's also like not racist and hanging out with this like woman throwing pitches at night. I'm like, no, give her a flaw. Make your characters more believable in their time frame by actually giving them something that the audience might not like about them.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Devil's advocate here, I think if you're trying to build a fantasy at a certain point, it's just like, if they want to focus, maybe their focus here is the queer storytelling, not necessarily the racism. Like, sure, the racism plays a role on one of the storylines, but like, it's not the overall thing. So like,
I mean,
I'm just
they
saying.
could add it in and not have it be the focus,
Yeah.
I mean, I know what their concern is, that nobody would like the character, but at the same time, like, I think we need to portray people honestly and for who people really are, which is flawed. And like people in the 40s, it was more common for them to think this way. And that's just what it was. They weren't as progressive as we're portraying them to be. So,
Right.
or at least they were, as long as it was in their like, little white bubble.
Yeah.
So whatever.
So now I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Since you actually finished the show, maybe that's your answer, but I know we're trying to keep away. You know what? Fuck it. We're going back to the question. Do you think A League of Their Own needed this reimagining?
Yeah, so before I watched it, I was like, no, this didn't need it. And it's like so crazy. It's kind of like with West Side Story, where it's like, oh, I enjoyed this movie so much. Like, you don't need to remake it. And then when they do it, you're like, wow, I never really realized how flawed the initial was and how it kind of did need this update or a new perspective to it.
Mm-hmm.
And then it kind of makes you feel like stupid for not realizing the inherent problems with the original piece. It's like, yeah, wow, there is no diversity in the first League of Their Own. Wow, everyone's straight, and like white people just like exist in a world with no black people and no Spanish people. Also, there's like no people, you know, from Asia anywhere in any of these properties, you know, so.
Well, actually, I was just reading an interesting article about how, you know, Muslim people make up 25% of the world population, and they make up 1% of media representation.
Yeah, seriously.
How fucked is that?
It is.
I don't even know what Asian population to representation is.
Yeah, and there's so many parts of Asia too. Like, what about the East Asian or like the South Asian people? You know, where we get more of like people from India or Pakistan, or so it's just like.
I guess Hollywood feels like, you know what, you had everything everywhere all at once. That's it. You're done.
They're taking their baby steps, but I mean, this just feels more. I mean, it almost feels like too good to be true, and it's like, wow, did they have this many lesbians on one team? But maybe they did.
I'm inclined to believe, maybe
based on stereotypes of women in sports. I think so.
Stereotypes. You know what they say about them.
Oh, okay, yeah. So
there's always a morsel of truth to them.
But I mean, that's for me. It's just like I actually did enjoy it, and it's also like, man, I just don't have enough, you know, lesbian content. So they are increasing in numbers, but you know, it's just like, wow, I kind of need to watch this whole show because what else do I have?
I mean, yeah, I mean, in terms of like lesbian programming, it's a lot less than gay programming.
Well, true, and also again, like for the fifth time I'm going to say in the show, I watch a lot of 1940s and 50s content, but I read into those movies. Like I was watching Gentlemen Prefer Blondes the other day with Jane Russell and Marilyn Monroe, and I read into that movie that they're lesbian lovers, right? So it's actually nice to see a movie or something that takes place, a TV show that takes place in the 40s where it's confirmed that there were lesbians, because I always have to read into it. So that's nice for me. What about you? Now you watched them reverse.
Yeah.
So how was that? Kind of.
It was fine, right? Because I had seen bits and pieces of the original one, right? I just never saw it in its entirety. I had an idea of the plot. Like, I didn't know up until just rewatching it that they were sisters, for example. Like, I thought they were just rivals on the team.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that changed my read of the film a little bit. Yeah, no, I mean, I love the diversity and stuff, and I was just kind of when I was watching the new one, like, I just felt like it's just like, oh, it's fine, it's cute, and I think, I don't know, it made me prefer the TV show only for its like inclusivity. Which I don't know if that should be a reason alone for me to prefer a show, but it was for me a little bit.
I still love the original film, and I'll always love the original film. It's not like points deducted now for the original. And I mean, Kit is the worst. You know, Madonna's whole like sex obsessed all the way May is a little redundant after a while, but it's a fucking great movie. And at the end of the day, like, it did not need this remake. But, you know, from my particular, you know, viewpoint, and just like me, again, like being someone who reads into things and stuff, so, you know, like I do really appreciate the diversity, you know, and I think, yeah, I would agree with you in that sense, where it's like, I think it's mainly because it's like the inclusivity is something that I can relate to,
right?
You know, it feels more accessible to me, or something that I can just like be like, oh wow, now this is something that it speaks deeper to me in a relatable manner and whatnot. And that alone, is it the best show? No. You know, like, whatever, watch it or don't. But like, it's just those little things, you know, where it's just like, yep, representation matters, and when you get it, it's awesome.
So that reminds me, for everyone who, I mean, this is leading the show, but if you guys didn't know, last week I was moderating a discussion. We watched Queer as Folk for the people at Hudson Pride. What's up, guys? If you're listening, we may have gotten some new listeners. If you're listening, hey, thank you for listening now. But one of the questions I posed to the audience there was, us as queer people, is it our duty to support other queer art just because it's queer? So I'm going to ask that to you, I guess, right? Like, as specifically considering how I think few lesbian programs there are. Like, do you feel as a lesbian you have to watch this and like in order for more lesbian content to come out?
Yeah, no, good question. I actually think my answer to that would be more leaning to no, because it has to exist for a purpose. I don't like things that exist just to exist, and I do not want things to exist to pander to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that this show is pandering to the queer community. I actually think that this is a show that's like, hey, we've all seen this movie for 30 years, and we're all asking ourselves the same question. You know, where's everybody else? And we've talked to people who existed, and we want to actually give this viewpoint. So I support it because of what it actually does in that way. But, you know, maybe other things like, you know, Queer as Folk, which is a show that I kind of just watched the first episode and I didn't really enjoy the new one. And I don't know if I could, like, maybe I have to go back and hear it from a different perspective. But, like, I don't know if I'm going to support that show just because it's queer representation. Now we have so much more queer representation and then done better, you know? Yeah. And, like, was this actually, you know, why does it exist? What does it provide to us? You know, like if it's also just pure bad, then we don't need it. So I don't know. I'm leaning more to no, actually.
Okay.
Like, I don't think that's how I feel about politics as well. I don't want a woman in the office just to have a woman in the office. Like, if she's a bad woman, I don't want her in the office.
That's true.
So,
I mean, yeah.
But point is that, so I'm not that type of person who's just like, hey, you know, as long as it's this, I'll take anything, even if it's not good for us.
Okay.
Now, I haven't come across a piece of media that I would say this is a good for the queer community as of yet, or if I have, I can't think of one. But I think this is good for us, so I do, in this term, like it. Now, what about you? What's your answer to that question?
What was my answer to that question? I hope it hasn't changed since last week. Indifferent. I think for me, I had to enjoy the media. I had to enjoy something about it, right? For me to, I'm not just going to blindly support queer media just for the sake of supporting queer media. So a great example would be the show on Netflix that came out, Uncoupled, where it's written by the guy who did Sex and the City. What's his name? I forgot. The name escapes me.
Michael Patrick King?
No, the original creator.
Darren Star.
Yes. So he has a new Netflix show starring Neil Patrick Harris. It focuses around a gay man of a certain age dealing with a breakup and kind of like rebuilding his life after a breakup. Show very, very middling is what I would say, where it's not like a great show, but I think I was entertained still. Like, I will admit, it's like, no, it's not a good show, but it's still, I was entertained by it. And bonus, it was telling stories of a part of the gay community that we don't get that many stories of, which is men of a certain age. Now, they're privileged men, sure, but I think in the gay community, we have this ageism thing where, like, after the age of, like, 40, you're, like, a geriatric, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I wasn't necessarily supporting that movie just for the sake of supporting that show for the sake of supporting it. I actually genuinely enjoyed it, and I will always say that. It's like same thing with Queer as Folk. I actually don't think it was a good show. I found it thoroughly enjoyable though. And it's a good thing I did, because I think overall, in terms of like the big steps it took for queer representation, it's a bonus for me. It's just like, okay, great. At least it also did that, you know?
Yeah. So maybe the Hudson Pride Center would want to watch A League of Their Own, and we can do another discussion. Because
Ooh, you should pitch it. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be fun. I might though show like the episode where we meet Bert, because I think that would be interesting too.
Okay.
You know, not just the first one. But maybe they're listening. Hey guys.
Hey.
But if you're still listening, this is a great time for you to let your voice be heard and to reach out to us. Ways you can reach out are on Instagram at Remakes, Reboots, Revivals, at Twitter at Remakes Podcast. Our Gmail is remakesrebootsrevivals@gmail.com. We're on YouTube and Facebook. Just search for Remakes, Reboots, Revivals. Leave us a review or rate us on any of your listening platforms. But if you're on Apple Podcasts, if you write a little review, that would be, we'd love to hear it. We'd love to read it and just hear from you guys. And another way we can hear from you is if you call into our voicemail service. And if we accrue enough of these, we will play it on an episode. And that number that you can call is
862-248-2326. That's 862-248-2326.
I feel like if you listen to this episode, you probably have tons of opinions that you want to share with us. So share them, because come on, we want to hear them. Next week is the perfect opportunity for you to also let us know, because we're talking about the new Disney Plus Pinocchio. Which
is that already next week?
That's already next week. It's
wow.
I think it's starting tomorrow. We're recording this on a Wednesday, September 7th. So I think
when it
on
comes
the
out.
8th, yeah. And if he's listening, happy 40th birthday to my brother-in-law, Jose.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. But until next time, stay an original.